Welcome back to the Mob Mentality Show. My name is Austin Chadwick and co-host is Chris Lucian. And today we're going to be continuing the series on influence. And today we're going to be diving specifically into influencing leadership in general a bit, but also specifically in related to mobbing. And Chris, I know you've recently done a talk on this, and I'm guessing you have some thoughts. How do you want to kickstart us, sir?
So I was at the software teaming conference and spoke specifically on influencing leadership. But I think, also based on our previous topics, I think kind of you have like the influencing up, influencing down, and influencing laterally, I guess. And so if we were to talk specifically about influencing up, I think that one of my best strategies. So there's a couple of situations that you could be in, and then I think I have strategies for each of those. But um, one situation is that you have a good relationship with a person, right? Another one is that maybe you have a bad relationship with that person, or a very skeptical or disconnected relationship. I think those are two very different situations, right? Because influencing up, but you have a good relationship, you probably could be very logical, right? But there might be some biases for people that are skeptics. And so for dealing with skepticism from a leader, or either laterally or above you or something, often I think inviting that criticism, especially kind of in a safer way. So it's like, hey, I'm about to do a presentation on this. Like maybe if you do some public speaking, you could invite them to give you criticism on your talk. That's surprisingly effective, and I've actually developed good relationships by asking my strongest critics for feedback and working through those things. So number one, I do think is for somebody that is a critic or maybe less involved, asking them for feedback on something else that would then allow you to go into the topic with them coming from a place of curiosity, because they could maybe be like, why would you be presenting on this if it's not as effective as working by yourself or something? And then other things that I would recommend is if it's somebody specific, and one thing I would do is just try and figure out the authors that they trust, the resources what videos do they watch, how do they learn new things. In the past, it's been very hard to send an executive a Martin Fowler blog, because he's a well-known developer and executives probably don't care. And so another option would be to find out what they read, and then figure out how to then find resources from within the sources that they trust. And so this is very much going to go away from the complete rejection response to a response of curiosity. And so I remembered, so if you send a hashtag no estimates thing from Twitter where everybody's having an angry conversation, versus like there's a Harvard Business Review article that talks about using budgets instead of estimation. And so you can obviously see from that extreme example where executives might be more willing to pay attention to those things. So I think often when we're trying to influence, a lot of the time it's like, hey, I found this great resource, here's the resource, but with no thought as to how much respect that resource has. Another, and I guess if you have like a really bad relationship with a person where you're not even willing to talk to them, then there was a really great tool from Esther Derby, which was kind of charting out a map of all the different relationships that you're involved in, and building up a positive relationship that already has a positive relationship with that other person. And so maybe you have a graph, and it's a weighted graph based on how much safety you have between people, and working on extending the reaches of those graphs to the shortest path possible to that person, so that you can eventually build up a rapport and a safety with them through secondary word of mouth. I found that to be very effective as well, and helps with a lot of challenged relationships in the past when those sorts of things have happened. So I don't know. That was kind of a little bit rambly, but Austin, if you have anything you want to jump in there with.
No, I absolutely love it. And kind of a few things occurred to me. You were talking about being open to feedback, inviting criticism and feedback, and I really like that too. And I think people can genuinely know when it's kind of like, here's the conclusion and I'm trying to bring you to it, versus genuine curiosity and vulnerability. And I think when you are genuinely curious about what someone has to say, and their criticisms or concerns, and you want to learn those, and you're open to being wrong, basically. I think I have less experience than you working at the leadership level, but I think just with people in general, or developers, that comes across very differently than, hey, I have a better way, and here it is, and here's the 5 reasons, and I'm not going to listen to you when you're talking, and then when you're done, I'm going to give you 5 more reasons, right? Where if you're genuinely curious, like, oh, well, tell me why you're concerned about that, or and you're genuinely vulnerable, and you're basically putting out that personal risk of possibly being wrong about something, which I think, if you are mobbing, is something that gets built up naturally, because your ideas get proven wrong a lot, and it becomes less of an uncomfortable thing.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a fun thing, like, oh, I thought A, but then we ran the experiment and showed that A was false, and that's okay. That's what learning is. That's good. And so, in the appropriate way to show that, and that might look very differently at a C-suite executive meeting than in a developer conversation. So I really like that. One other thing that jumped out to me that I do have a story with was kind of natural trust via positive interactions. So you were kind of talking about the relationship map. And I think just having, positive relationships with everyone you work with in general will naturally kind of influence that relationship map that you're talking about, whether you're being, more calculatedly strategic with it, or just building up positive relationships. I remember once we were working on something, and the client, the user of the product, had a history of a challenged relationship. Let's just say there was history of things not going so well. And so we just focused a lot on our interactions with them just being very good. You know what I mean? We were very kind. We were very supportive. Didn't mean we didn't disagree, but it was just like, we're here to help. Here's the problem. Here's the thing. Can we solve it together? And I remember one person on the team basically said, like, so it's like we're overwhelming them with positivity. And it's like, yep, it's a good way to do relationships in general. And despite the negative history in the past, things turned out really well. The delivery went good. And the relationship was positive as far as I can remember, before switching to a different team. But I had one other point, but any other reactions to any of that, Chris?
Yeah. So while I agree with you, sometimes the distances become really big, right? So
Right.
if it's another department or somebody you don't interact with often,
Sure.
sometimes you have to make a concerted effort, especially if there are a lot of like fundamental attribution error happening, right?
Mhm.
And so, I think that the specific story I'm thinking of is just that there was somebody looking from the outside in, had no real control or interaction, but generally speaking, you would want to make sure that a really strong and vocal skeptic that is unrelated to the team and you have no real good reason to work with them, can, maybe you can bring that down, right? That external criticism down, or something along those lines. So you could have a contentious relationship with this person, or you can work on building a very long bridge, right? And so, I think for those of you out there that are experiencing something like this, where you just don't know how you would cross that chasm, you don't have enough opportunities to interact with them, then this is one strategy of kind of understanding, well, it's like, okay, this person influences that person and they spend a lot of time together, da, da, da. and find the people that you do have that access to and be positive around them. But you might even consciously reach out more or ask for
Mhm.
criticism on a presentation more, or you obviously don't want it to be weird, but you at the same time, I think there is at a certain level of distance, there's probably a necessity to reach out. Right.
Nice. Nice. No, no, no. I could definitely see that, right? If it's at times it's really important to, for the sake of, your relationship with the person, or for the sake of the company working, the organization working well together. It is, I can see it as a very altruistic, goodwill thing to be like, how can I build a bridge, possibly through other people, to restore something that's been broken? And I think that's great. Yeah, another thing that I've thought about specifically with mobbing that I've seen quite a bit is whenever I've come into a team and there's been expressed skepticism from outside the team, from leadership, for example, about mobbing. Um, Typically, some things we've talked about in prior episodes and in this episode, like being open to feedback and criticism and talking through it, it's great. But also kind of this, the fantastic ability of CD to build trust, right? Um, what I've noticed is being able to, walk through criticisms and feedback is maybe like, part of it, but then also they just don't really care if we're mobbing or not, or solo, if the quality is high and the delivery is high, right? They just
Yeah.
start to care less about it, in my experience, and they're just happy with the results, right? So I think often it's not that you're dismissive of skepticism or conversation. It's sometimes it's just like, hey, I invite you to see how it goes for the next couple of weeks, and then we can talk about it then, or something like that. Or say nothing and just keep delivering and being like, you asked for this yesterday, here it is. What would you like next? And you do that 10 times, and it's just not even a topic of
Yeah,
conversation
it'll
anymore.
go away for sure. I totally
Yeah.
agree with that. I think
Yeah.
if you have the opportunity to be lean or practice, continuous delivery and
Mhm.
those sorts of things, most of the time, on average, most people out there are working in a waste filled environment. And so, I think optimizing for those things, including mobbing, can really help. And as long as you have the luxury to create change on your own as well.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so, but again, I go back to the environment thing at that point. It's
Mhm.
better to advocate for self-organizing teams
Mhm.
than it is to advocate for mobbing, because sometimes that one will lead to the other. And so, I think that if, yeah, again, if change is possible in your environment, then yes, maybe it's just convincing a few people that the idea may have merit so that you can try it. But I think more often than not, I hear of people in environments where, you know, changing the way your desk looks is harder than or as hard as changing anything. And so when it's like a difficult, heavy lift, I think that certainly it can be different in that scenario.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And the I have one final topic. We don't have a lot of time, so maybe this might bleed into another episode. In that I've seen this occur with leadership, specifically, and I've also seen it occur just in relationships in general. Is you kind of do what you're talking about, where you demonstrate vulnerability and you're open to criticism and you work through, different ideas. And in the conversation, it seems positive, but then the actions outside the conversation show that they're not bought in and that they're working against it or even
Yeah.
dissatisfied. But every time you talk to them, it's this is great. And, you know, I feel like, I've seen it work through where maybe there's parts of the relationship map with people they trust, and that's like the good cop. And then I've been the bad cop where they pretend everything's fine when we talk, but then behind the scenes, I find out that they're not. But there is someone else they trust, and that's like the good cop, and that makes everything okay in the end. And so I've seen that pattern naturally emerge. Maybe it's an anti-pattern, but just your general thoughts on that situation where, for everything you can perceive, it seems to be a good radical candor, psychologically safe conversation, but then the behaviors after the fact show otherwise.
Yeah. Well, I think the behavior is the reality, right? And
Right.
I
Yeah.
mean, for whatever reason, for one reason or another, a lot of people out there have made their career on that style of behavior. And sometimes the environment invites nothing but that, right? Like you have no way
Mhm.
to move up and so some people, I think people get shaped in that way over time. Um, and so, my main thing is to pay attention to the actions, not what they're necessarily saying, right? And then based on those actions, determine where you stand with them. So conversations are often, so people respond really well to face-to-face conversation. Um, and working in person often can, hide the true reality of the non-face-to-face interactions. I think being face-to-face, people can, if they are a manipulative for whatever reason, people can be more manipulative face-to-face than they can be over a remote connection. Um, so one of the things that I think you can, um, so paying attention to their actions, trying to take the emotion out of it, and then based on their actions, evaluate for where you stand. But still, then I would refer back to the idea of influencing the people that they do work well with, right?
Mhm.
Um, and so, uh, so there's the book, The Four Agreements, which kind of talks about one of the four agreements is not don't take anything personally. And so often it's been very successful for me in my career to just not take negativity personally and still, just try to act, as good as possible in respect to the entire system, and not even try and retaliate, but instead working with people to find a better way. And so this is where I recommend highly relentless transparency. Promote your metrics, promote, make everything visible. Dora metrics, you're talking about delivery frequency. A lot of people don't understand delivery frequency, but they understand a metric and they might read about Dora. And so sometimes you have to make it super visible so that somebody that wants to say something bad about you can't, right? And so often if you're very, very transparent,
Mhm.
it takes a lot of teeth out of the people that are behaving that way.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, and those are good environmental considerations, and seeking the next level of improving things. And I guess at the personal level, whenever I've encountered that, it's kind of like, well, I did what I could, and some of that stuff is out of my control, and that's okay. you know.
Yeah.
Um, so I think you're right. I think there's this good tension of being at peace for doing what you could,
Yeah.
even if the result wasn't ideal. But also seeking of creative ways to, give it another opportunity for an improvement. And so
Yeah.
I
Well,
like it.
and
Yeah.
so if you let it go, right,
Mhm.
then I think you are accepting whatever happens afterwards. And so they continue the behavior, right? So
Mm,
they're going to be, if they never get convinced otherwise, they will always be a challenge.
mm,
And it will come up repeatedly. And so just like how we write unit tests for our code so that bugs don't keep reappearing, we
yeah.
need to do something similar to prevent the next time the bad interaction would happen with another person. And sometimes we don't have direct control over it, but what we do have direct control over is the interaction with the people around that surround the other person.
Yeah, for
And
sure. For sure.
so, yeah. And so in a complex reporting structure situation, if that person's the leader of other team members, but those team members think positively of you, then in their team meetings, those team members may say positive things about you to that leader.
Right.
And if they are doing the like, nice cordial relationship up front, but doing something completely different in the back, then you can slowly diffuse that. But you can also work on the power differential that you have by being very transparent.
Nice. Yeah, I love it. Cool. Any other thoughts before we shut down here, Chris?
Stay incremental, make sure the environment's good, and be open to be influenced and always work toward better. Don't take it personally.
Nice, nice,
But
right on. Well, please like and subscribe. We would love to hear your feedback. We are open to your criticisms and on our ideas about influencing, and we are genuinely curious, and we are vulnerable to hear them. So please reach out via LinkedIn, X, YouTube comments, and more. And looking forward to the conversations. Mob on and have a good one, everybody. See ya.
bye, everyone. Thank you.